It's a really great pleasure to welcome you today to this public lecture at Queen's University, Belfast, and to introduce our distinguished speaker. Queen's is committed to hosting major public events featuring leading political figures and providing a unique opportunity for open debate and discussion on political issues. Today's lecture reflects that commitment, and it's a particular pleasure for me, personally, to welcome and introduce our speaker. The Right Honourable Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour Party since September 2015, has been MP for Islington North since 1983. In a long and influential career of political commitment and leadership, Mr Corbyn's roles have included trade union activism, anti-apartheid work, involvement in the campaign for nuclear disarmament, leadership of the Stop the War coalition which he chaired between 2011 and 2015, and now, building on his lengthy career in the Labour Party, his role as leader of the opposition. In the 2017 UK general election, under Mr Corbyn's leadership, the Labour Party made its first gain in seats since 1997 and its largest increase in vote share since 1945. Jeremy, I wish you attended every lecture that I spoke at. Would you please now again show a very warm Queen's University Belfast welcome to our speaker today, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's absolutely wonderful to be here in Belfast. I'm joined by our Northern Ireland team on the front row over here, Tony Antonazzi, Keir Starmer, who's an interloper from the Brexit team, but helping out, Tony Lloyd and Steve Pound. And I'm very pleased they're here with me, and just to say thank you to them for the incredible work they do here in Northern Ireland, but also in Parliament, speaking up for the needs of the people of Northern Ireland. Thank you very much for everything you do. And this is my first visit as leader of the Labour Party, and I'm really delighted to have this chance to be here for a couple of days to reach out and talk to people from all communities and all backgrounds and discuss their hopes for the future and listen to their ideas and how all communities can continue to work together to build on the achievements of recent years. But first of all, I'd like to thank Queen's University. It's a wonderful university, fantastic institution, and what a fantastic meeting hall you've got. I wish every university had one like this. And inviting me to speak this morning, and thank you, Professor Richard English, for his very kind introduction. There was more we could have said about human rights causes the world over, but we are limited by time. But it was fascinating to talk to you earlier about the work being done here at Queen's, especially on a subject I'm personally keen on, international engagement and dialogue. And so it's an honour to receive such a warm welcome of a university which open to all cultures, ethnic groups and social backgrounds, and also helping to make Queen's a world leader across a range of fields, and welcome all those overseas students that choose to study in Queen's, and I hope those numbers increase, and I also hope that students from Queen's get the opportunity to study abroad as well as part of their course, because the international dialogue between students is very important. For many people, this university has been and continues to be a cradle of free speech and a champion of civil rights. And I thank Queen's, not just for today, but all the other days that Queen's has done so much to enhance dialogue and understanding, both in Northern Ireland and around the world. Thank you to Queen's University for that. It is an iconic institution, and notable alumni include Nobel Prize winner Seamus Heaney, and the Vice-Chancellor very kindly presented me with this book this morning. the works of poetry, an anthology of poetry, The Blackbird's Nest, from Queen's University, signed by Seamus Heaney, and I will treasure this very much indeed. Thank you very much for this very generous gift that you've given me today. Seamus Heaney, a fantastic poet. Other alumni include former Irish President Mary McAleese, as well as the former First Minister Lord Trimble, which brings me on to what I want to focus on today. 20 years ago this week, the people of both Northern Ireland and of the Republic of Ireland voted in a referendum to accept the terms of the Good Friday Agreement. That vote changed the course of history on this island and represented the clearing of the final hurdle of a long and difficult process that opened the door to 2 decades of sustained peace. Today, I want to look back on those 20 years, look back at the sacrifice and courage shown at all levels of society that paved the way for something that had once seemed utterly impossible. That was the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement. We need that spirit again. Stormont and Westminster parties, the British and Irish governments, business and unions, if we want to secure 20 more years of peace and greater prosperity for the many, not the few, all across this island. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be able to say that many young people across Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland and Great Britain, do not remember a time when the bloody hand of conflict held a grip on our respective lands. Communities from Derry to Omagh to Warrington were affected by the plague of violence for a generation, leaving deep and long-lasting scars for all those who lived through those troubled times. All too often in that period, the willingness to use force and reach for weapons instead of dialogue and diplomacy inflicted unnecessary suffering on innocent people. So, we rightly celebrate the anniversary of the end of those years of violence. It's important we remember the effort and determination it took on all sides to get where we are today. I stand here as leader of the British Labour Party, a party that is proud of the part it played in helping to bring peace and stability to Northern Ireland, something many believed could never be achieved. The transformation we've seen in Belfast alone since 1998 is remarkable. I visited the city many times long before today's speech became a reality and have witnessed a very visible and cultural transformation that's taken place. Of course, first and foremost, that is down to the determination and creativity of its great people. But it also drew on a new confidence that emerged in the late 1990s, culminating in a political agreement that was skillfully crafted to create a framework to allow all sides to rebuild communities, develop economy, and foster social justice across society. Peace must also be accompanied by social justice and real opportunities for all. So what is it about the Good Friday Agreement that has so far proven to be so durable? How did this agreement help convince people and underpin a cross-community consensus to put down the weapons and work together? Primarily, I believe the main reason the agreement has proven robust is because it was built on the back of the spirit and determination of the women and men of those communities who were no longer willing to tolerate the pain and division which the Troubles had grown. And in turn, this spirit fostered a courage that grew across all parts of society. From political leaders to working-class communities, all had to be prepared to take risks and make sacrifices, and had to be willing to compromise. All knew the conflict must be brought to an end. Of course, there are some names that stand out during that period. Plaudits have been given in recent months to leaders on all sides who worked to broker peace. And today, I want to add my own words of respect, starting with Lord David Trimble and the Reverend Ian Paisley, both men who made brave efforts to bring their communities on side and ultimately to embrace peace. I must also mention John Hume, a man who has dedicated his life to his people, civil rights and peace. These examples were set alongside heroes of mine, such as Inez McCormack, a woman who throughout her life overcame numerous obstacles to bring about change in her society. In 1976, Inez became the first female full-time official in NUPE, a union that I worked for at that time, the National Union of Public Employees, and then later became the first female president of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. Inez used her work through the trade union movement to play a pivotal role in the peace process. And we should never forget the campaigns she led to stand up for the rights of the most socially excluded in society. It's also right for me to pay tribute to both Martin McGuinness and Gerry Adams, men who led the Republican movement from conflict to negotiation and diplomacy, arts they both mastered in the cause of peace. I can't think of a greater sign of the progress made over the last two decades when at Martin's funeral last year, not only were the people in attendance from Republican and nationalist communities, but also representatives of the Loyalist and Unionist sides, including First Minister Arlene Foster and, of course, former US President Bill Clinton. It's also right to recognise the work of the British and Irish government leaders of the time, whose determination made the impossible possible. For that, both Bertie Ahern and, of course, Tony Blair should be given the credit for the work that they did. And finally, there is another person I also want to give a special mention today, somebody who, when remembering the anniversary of the Belfast Agreement, is not always given the accolades she deserves. That's Mo Mowlam. I obviously knew Mo well as a colleague in Parliament and that wonderful, warm person that she was, and the hugging and the embraces last forever from Mo, and there were many of them. Mo's determination was vital in securing a lasting peace, her role indispensable in bringing people together. Only a few months ago, I read an article by Mo's stepdaughter, Henrietta Morton, who expressed concern that Mo's role was often downplayed. So on behalf of the Labour Party, I want to make clear we will never forget Mo's contribution, and neither, I think, will the people of Belfast or of Dublin. Thank you, Mo, for all you did. Of course, there are many others we should thank who, like those I've mentioned, all had one thing in common. They're willing to talk, to negotiate, to respect their opponents, and to walk in the other person's shoes. Many of you will know that since 1983, I've represented a London constituency with a very large Irish community, which led me to take a keen interest in the politics of Northern Ireland and of Ireland. I worked with colleagues in Parliament, including the SDLP, and met people from across the spectrum, campaigning for peace and justice in Northern Ireland. In 1993, Ian Paisley was expelled from the House of Commons for telling the truth, that the then Northern Ireland Secretary had told a falsehood. Now, of course, all MPs are honourable. It's in the rules. So they're, by definition, honourable. And you cannot accuse another MP of lying or telling an untruth or a falsehood. So the Speaker named Ian Paisley and expelled him from the House. Now, normally, when an MP is expelled, there is a vote to endorse the expulsion, to endorse the decision of the Speaker. The Reverend Paisley voted against his own expulsion, which was logical, I suppose, and I joined him in the lobby to also vote against his expulsion. And I remember the scene as I walked through the lobby. He looked me up and down with a sharp glare before saying in that unforgettable gravelly voice, "What are you doing here?" You see, I've always believed to bring about real change and end conflict, to bring communities together, you have to talk to people with whom you may not always agree. Talking to the other side does help to bring about peace. In 1998, we were fortunate to have leaders who were prepared to put that principle into practice. Of course, the Good Friday Agreement was not just about that one day. I think we all knew that at the time, that the hardest part wouldn't be reaching an agreement, but instead it would be how we would implement that agreement, sustain it, and create a peace that would truly last. For that to happen, it was essential we recognise the traditions and the history of each community and recognised and respected the identity of people on either side of what had become the divide. This was, and still is, important for strong and healthy long-term relationships here, across communities and across borders, indeed a lesson the world over. Perhaps where the agreement was at its boldest was its radical reform of Northern Ireland's political and institutional structures, as well as creating a framework for North-South relations and the relationship between Britain and the Republic of Ireland, that gave all parties a basis to find a route out of a generation of conflict together. For all the current problems and deadlock, there can be no doubt that devolution and power sharing have given every community a voice and helped maintain that peace process. Of course, there are still plenty of disagreements, passionate debates and high emotions, but the Good Friday Agreement has allowed those conflicts to be played out in a democratic structure, underpinned by rights for all rather than through violence. The agreement was also crucial in giving a commitment to, and I quote, the mutual respect, civil rights and the religious liberties of everyone in the community. That sounds like something which today we might absolutely take for granted. But let us not forget, many communities before and during the Troubles were denied those basic human rights, and conflict inevitably dehumanises each side in the eyes of the other. Conflicts all over the world have the same experience. The reforms of key internal institutions also helped build trust, and the idea enshrined in the agreement that public bodies must demonstrate they're delivering equal opportunities across communities was and remains hugely important, as was the establishment of the Human Rights Committee in protecting minorities from discrimination. We must also not forget the weight the agreement gave to recognition of the suffering caused by violence in Northern Ireland's past. And the move to establish the Northern Ireland Victims Commission helped both promote reconciliation and preserve the precious memory of the loved ones who had died, the victims of the conflict. All of this brought a new beginning and laid the ground for the vital work of decommissioning of arms and the removal of military infrastructure. But as we stand here today, in celebration of 20 years of peace, we must also recognise we're standing at a potential crossroads. It is right we celebrate the achievements, not least as it is those achievements we must use as a springboard for the 20 years to come and the decades after that. We must neither be complacent nor reckless. So I want to send this message to the people. Labour is as committed to the Good Friday Agreement as we've ever been. It has served us well for 20 years. With commitment and determination, will provide us with a framework for the next 20. And with that in mind, I want to make a plea to all parties and all sides. We must do all we can to make power sharing work again in Stormont. We need all sides to come together and make devolution work again. That means tough choices. It means tough choices, it means compromise and give and take. But we owe it to the people of these islands not to allow political disagreements to open the way for any return to the grim days of the past. Look at what Stormont has achieved. You resisted many of the worst aspects of the UK government's punitive social security policies using the powers provided by devolution. There is so much more that could be achieved. From a full-scale upgrade of the Northern Ireland economy and investment in good jobs for all communities to the historic step of equal marriage. But It's not just the political parties here that need to renew their efforts. Political parties in Westminster must also do more. We cannot take for granted that this sustained period of peace will last forever. It takes effort to keep things moving. Stormont must be an example throughout the world of how dialogue, negotiation and diplomacy can defeat conflict. Now let's show we can continue to build on that peace through democracy. So if the current stalemate in Stormont cannot be sorted out in Belfast, I call on the UK government to reconvene the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference. We must step up to find a creative solution in the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement that avoids a return to direct Westminster rule and lays the ground for further progress for all communities. But to secure prosperity and peace on these islands, we also need to talk about Brexit, about the European Union, and the future relationship between the UK and the Republic of Ireland in particular. The British government is frankly making a mess of these negotiations. Week after week, it becomes clearer and clearer that they're too divided to make the right choices and too weak to get a good Brexit deal. They're negotiating with themselves, not with the European Union. Driven by free market fantasies within their ranks, the reckless Conservative approach to Brexit is a very real threat to jobs and living standards here in Northern Ireland and risks undermining and destabilising the cooperation and relative harmony of recent years. So let me be clear, Labour will not support any Brexit deal that includes a return to a hard border on this island. We are also clear there must be no effective border created in the Irish Sea either. That is why Labour has put forward a plan that would go a long way to solving this issue, a plan for which I believe there is a majority in Westminster. By negotiating a new and comprehensive customs union with the EU, which includes a British say in future trade deals, we can ensure trade on this island stays frictionless and free-flowing and prevents communities being divided. That, coupled with a new relationship with the single market based on protecting and improving existing standards of rights in work, environment and consumers and our human rights, shows how Labour has the best plan to avoid a return to a hard border and achieve a Brexit deal that protects and delivers for all our people. Tomorrow, I'll be visiting the border to talk to those communities who would be most affected by any change to current arrangements. And again, I want to make a plea across both benches in Parliament in Westminster. Let's not give up years of hard-fought cooperation and stability for the pipe dream of some kind of race-to-the-bottom free trade deal with the likes of Donald Trump and the USA and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. The Conservative government talks about how technology could avoid a hard border under their plans and how new systems can provide checks and collect tariffs. But even if that were true, and I seriously doubt it to be true, it misses the point. Opposition to the idea of bringing back a hard border to this land isn't just about avoiding paperwork or tariffs, important as that obviously is. It's about deep-rooted cultural and community ties. An open border is a symbol of peace. Two communities living and working together after years of conflict. Communities who no longer feel that their traditions are under threat. Theresa May has a hard decision to make. People here need clarity. If she can't face down the reckless ideologues in her own party, Labour will give Parliament the opportunity to do it instead. We will protect peace and prosperity by preventing the return of a hard border on this island. Peace can and must be extended through real social and economic advances for all communities, with the state at regional and national level prepared to act to bring about a full-scale upgrade of the economy. While many economic decisions for Northern Ireland are rightly decided in Stormont, a Labour government in Westminster would make sure that Northern Ireland has more money to invest in its people and its public services. We'll make sure the people of Northern Ireland do not miss out. We're committed to supporting manufacturing in Northern Ireland, and Labour's recent pledge to reverse the decision to put the £1 billion contract to build the Royal Fleet auxiliary ships out to international tender will keep jobs and prosperity in Britain's shipyards and could be of benefit in Belfast also. Don't listen to anyone who says we can't build things anymore. Shipbuilding is no lame duck and can have a high-tech, high-skilled and exciting future right here in Northern Ireland. And as we leave the EU, it's essential we not only make sure our manufacturers have access to markets and on-time supply chains, we also need to make sure the communities of Northern Ireland continue to have access to vital funding for energy, research, agriculture, cultural projects and environmental sustainability. Much of the work that's done in this university and others will benefit the entire population of Northern Ireland. Leaving the EU should not be used as an excuse to reduce investment and opportunity. On the contrary, we must use powers returned from Brussels to intervene, upgrade and reshape our economy for the 21st century to deliver real social and economic advances for all our communities. So in conclusion, we all have a lot of work to do. I'm proud to be here in Belfast as leader of the Labour Party, a party with a strong record in helping to deliver peace and greater prosperity. I hope to use this visit to talk to people from different communities and to listen to their concerns and hopes for the future. We're here to celebrate 20 years of peace, 20 years as an example to the rest of the world of how communities can turn conflict into cooperation. And so many conflicts around the world have benefited from the experience in Northern Ireland, to Colombia, to South Africa, to the Middle East. There are many people looking to see if it can work in the long term. Let's work together in the spirit of friendship, cooperation and hope for another 20 years and beyond. As Seamus Heaney once wrote, history says, don't hope on this side of the grave. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and history rhyme. Let the history of the last 20 years and our hopes for the future guide us as we make the history of years to come. Thank you very much.
Jeremy, thank you very much indeed for that powerful speech. Jeremy has kindly agreed to take a few questions. We have microphones here, so I'm just going to pick up some people. There's two at the front. We'll take two at a time. There's one here at the front, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Corbyn. You're very welcome to Queen's and indeed to Belfast. My name is Stephen McChrystal. I'm the president of the Students' Union here at Queen's, representing just over 24,000 students. So it was great to hear you talk about unions in your speech and the power that they have and the role that they play in society. And the Students' Union here at Queen's is one with a very proud history, right through from the civil rights movement to the present day, for example, where tomorrow we are playing our role in calling for a yes vote in the south of Ireland as they have a referendum to repeal the referendum. But this year, I think it's fair to say, this year for the Students' Union and for our 24,000 students, it has been a bit of a challenge in terms of lobbying politicians for the political change and the social change that we want to see and fighting for that social justice. Issues like LGBT plus issues, equal marriage, which you mentioned, and I'm delighted that one of your MPs, Conor McGinn from South Armagh, has sponsored that private member's bill to introduce equal marriage, which unfortunately has been blocked at the minute. But so LGBT plus issues, access to reproductive health care, and of course Brexit. So my question to you, it was great to hear about the hopeful message that you have for the future here. But in terms of the message to political parties, where do you see students coming into that conversation? What role do you see students and Students' Union having, and how can they shape the political conversation to build a future for a better Northern Ireland for everyone?
Thank you. We'll take a couple of questions and then give Jeremy a chance to answer. There's a question here at the end. Yep. Thank you very much.
Hi, Professor Deirdre Heenan, Ulster University. Delighted to hear you reiterating no return to a hard border. But I suppose my question would be, is it not possible and indeed preferable to simply remain within the customs union and the single market rather than go through a long, protracted negotiation when we don't know what the outcome would be?
Jeremy, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks for the questions, and thank you, Stephen, for yours, and well done on your work as President of the Students' Union and the campaigning work you do. Congratulations, it was great to meet you earlier on, and you're quite right about the work done on civil rights in this university. And you think about it, any conflict anywhere in the world starts with an abuse of human rights, starts with a denial of basic rights, starts with a closing off of a democratic process for people. And the work that's been done in Queen's has been iconic the world over in trying to challenge all of that. And Conor McGinn's bill is one that we strongly support. I'm not quite sure I can give you too much optimism about the chances of getting through in its current form in Parliament because of the status of the bill itself. But the principle behind it is one that we absolutely support and do support his campaign to bring it about. A similar bill is being introduced in the Lords as well. As to students' influence, I think the election of last year showed not so much that young people and students weren't interested in politics, but that for a very long time politics hadn't been interested in young people or students and simply ignored them. Hence, we've had a process all over Britain of increasing university fees, less funding to support individual students into further and higher education. And we put forward a proposal to completely change that in our manifesto for the many, not the few, which was that we would end fees at universities and colleges, and we'd give real parity of esteem to those undertaking vocational qualifications as much as academic qualifications. Look, societies need lawyers, they need engineers, they also need electricians, electronics engineers, and plumbers and carpenters. You can't work without all of those skill sets, and we need to invest in all of them. How can you influence politics? By what you're doing. By what you're doing by speaking up, what you're doing demanding support and rights for students, and the contribution you're making to political debate as a whole. So that the message has to be, we want the re-establishment of the political agreement in Stormont so that an administration can be re-established. It's simply not credible to go on for months and months and months with impasse and nothing happened, and civil servants left to make a decision which is then challenged by the High Court. I don't want to bring back direct rule from Westminster. I've been there, seen that, done that, don't want it. I want the power to be here. Therefore, the parties have got to get together and come to an agreement on it, and I urge them to do so. And if necessary, obviously, as I've said, the Intergovernmental Conference could come back. And so I urge young people to be involved in politics, but also never be afraid to say the unsayable and never be afraid to campaign on any issue of injustice that you find. Our human rights legislation never came from above. It came from activism on the streets. It came from brave human rights defenders. It came from brave lawyers, not just in this country, but in many parts of the world. And I was just reading the UN report on human rights in Britain. Some of it is uncomfortable reading. That's a good thing. Uncomfortable reading for politicians from a human rights organisation is a good thing, as long as they act in response to it. On the question about the EU and the single market and customs union, the whole point is that we recognise the result of the referendum, and we have to continue a huge level of trade with Europe. Inevitably, that is the whole British economy is based on that, or largely based on that. And therefore, what we've suggested is not remaining in something we couldn't remain in anyway because we wouldn't be members of the European Union, but having a trading relationship which gives us that tariff-free trade with Europe and a customs union which gives us a say in what is happening. And we've put this forward. We believe it to be achievable and credible, and we're doing it not in a spirit of threatening the EU in the way that many Conservative Party MPs and backbenchers do, which is, and indeed the government does from time to time, of saying they will undertake other trade arrangements in other parts of the world deliberately to undermine the EU. We would protect product standards, we'd protect environmental standards, we would protect labour rights, and we would protect workers' rights and consumers' rights in general. If we go down the road, which has been proposed by some, of a sweetheart deal with the USA, what we'd be doing is importing lower food standards, worse agricultural practices, worse labour conditions, and we'd be importing a free-for-all market economy in which the biggest and most powerful multinationals would no doubt do very well. Smaller enterprises and farmers would do very badly. And so we do not see a way forward other than a one-off agreement, a special agreement, a customs union, a form of customs union with the European Union. Keir Starmer and I and others have worked very hard on this, and that is what we're putting forward. We have to accept the result of the referendum, but at the same time we have to make sure we have this close relationship with Europe. I'd also say that the first thing we did after the referendum result was Andy Burnham, on our behalf, as Shadow Home Secretary at the time, before he became the Mayor of Greater Manchester, proposed a motion to the House of Commons that all EU citizens be given permanent rights of residence and of family reunion in the UK. We will stick to that, and we will legislate for that from day one. Almost 2 years since the referendum, it still hasn't happened under this Tory government. We would do it straight away because those EU nationals have made a massive contribution to our society in health, in education, in so many other ways. They should not be put through the stress and strain and trauma they've been put through since the referendum. I feel for them, and we will help them out.
There are many hands going up. I'm going to take the first two that I saw on this side. There's the microphone. Thank you. There's one here. The microphone come across. There's one there. Thank you. And then one on the front.
Who's it going to?
Thank you.
You're very welcome to Belfast, Jeremy. It's great to see you here, and you've brought the good weather with you as well, I think so.
I aim to please.
I'm tempted to ask you, have you read the Good Friday Agreement? But I know that you will have, so I won't ask that question. There's a lot of work ongoing here at Queen's on the impact of Brexit in Northern Ireland, and we've seen evidence this week of the rise really of the Remain vote here. And I think obviously you'll know that Northern Ireland has not consented to this. I just want to get your thoughts on that and the idea that a number of people have suggested, and whatever way you want to describe it and whatever formulation you want to use, is that the distinctive circumstances of Northern Ireland, the unique circumstances, the specific issues here should be reflected in some kind of special arrangement that is respectful of our particular circumstances. And I wonder if you could give us your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. There's a question right at the front row here on the left, if the microphone could come. We'll take this question too and then give Jeremy a chance to address them. Thank you.
Hi, Falter Goldmel Firster. I'm Clea Smith, an A-level politics student. My question today is, in the likely event that you're the next British Prime Minister, will you here now commit to calling a border poll on Irish unity?
Commit to what, sorry?
To a border poll on Irish unity.
Thanks for your question. Have you got A-level exams later today? Is this going to be the answer you put in your exam question? Can we wish you well with your exam today? I hope it goes well for you. I'll come back to you. On the first question, the point I'm making is that we don't want there to be a hard border between the north and the south. That's clear. If a special arrangement is made that creates some special trading relationship between the Republic and Northern Ireland, then quite clearly you have to have a border somewhere. Do you then have a border between Ireland, between the Republic of Ireland and the rest of the UK, or do you have a special border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK? Our point is there has to be a customs arrangement with the EU which prevents there being a hard border in Ireland. That means, therefore, there isn't a hard border on trade anywhere with the EU. That has to be clear. It's quite interesting that when Keir and I went to meet Michel Barnier quite a while ago, we had many meetings with him, the first meeting with him, the first subject he raised was the Northern Ireland border. They are very, very well aware of the consequences for the history of this island of not reaching an agreement which prevents a hard border reopening. So the road we're going down is one of a customs union with the European Union and access to the EU single market. And where powers are returned to the UK from Brussels, which many will be, then those powers should then be devolved to the administrations concerned. So Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, English regions would get those powers. We do not see this as an opportunity for a centralisation of any kind of powers or support mechanisms to Whitehall at the expense of other parts of the UK. On your question about a border poll, that would be a decision that could be made within the terms of the Good Friday Agreement. And if that is the wish, then clearly such a poll would happen. I'm not asking for it, I'm not advocating it. What I'm asking for is a return to the fullness of the Good Friday Agreement, which would open up the opportunities and possibilities for the future of Ireland as a whole. That is the point of the Good Friday Agreement, was not direct rule, not imposition of a political view from Westminster, but devolution of powers to Stormont here, and of course the relationship with the Republic. And it's quite clear that it's there for a poll on both sides of the border, should that be something that is demanded.
Jeremy, you can tell there are hands all over the hall, and we just have to have you back many times to ask you more questions.
Listen, I'd be very, very happy to come back again any time, and I'd like to come back and have further discussions with you, particularly about your work on human rights and peace building, which you've done such great work on, and it's been such a model for so many people. I'd love to come back if you'll have me back.
We'll definitely have you back. Can I ask one question which picks up on something you said in your speech, which was about the very powerful point about the importance of dialogue, of talking to people in conflict, and the exemplary role that Northern Ireland has had with its peace process. Were you to be UK Prime Minister, one of the regions of the world where conflicts would be on your desk would be the Middle East, Israel, Palestine. Can you say something about how optimistic you are that the kind of dialogue and peace-building processes could be applied to that currently very troubled political region?
There has to be a dialogue, there has to be a peace-building process, and that has to be pursued actively by a lot of people. Otherwise, we end up with the whole Middle East spinning even worse out of control. The killing of people 2 weeks ago in Gaza was a signal of just how bad things have got. And so a Labour government would be a very strong advocate for peace
within the Middle East, would be a very strong advocate for the end of the Israeli settlement policy, for recognizing that only a two-state solution with Israel and Palestine alongside each other is a realistic way forward for the future, and providing economic hope for people, particularly people in Gaza. That sense of hopelessness of young people in Gaza and in the West Bank when they cannot pursue their economic dreams or any other kind of dreams because of the difficulties of travel and of work and developing the economy are a very, very serious part of it. And so we would be a strong advocate for it and would, as a policy, oppose the settlement policy and oppose the, effectively, the blockade of Gaza, which creates a very dangerous atmosphere.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you to all of you for coming to this session. In conclusion, 3 things. 1, we will please have you back many times. It would be great to have you here again. 2, thank you for your powerful speech and engagement with questions. And 3, do please now join me in thanking our speaker today, Jeremy Corbyn.